Hey guys, how are all of you beautiful people? Hope all of you are doing great. This is in Marvel I Am God. Were Endless transmigrated the timeline of Wolverine 3 and became the last mutant of the old era. At the moment, the X-Men have long since disbanded, Mutant is no longer brilliant, Wolverine is entering old age, and the entire race is in peril. Fortunately, he found that when he watched battles he could obtain the opponent's abilities. So let's start this story, relax and enjoy. Santa Fe, New Mexico. This ancient city on the border of the country, with a history of 400 years, is known as the Palace of the Ruler, but because of the remoteness of the city, many criminals live in seclusion in the city to escape wants. Coupled with the fact that there are stowaways from neighboring countries on the border, the order in the city is extremely chaotic. The crime rate is high, robbery, shooting, smuggling. It's happening almost all the time. At the moment, the sky gradually darkened, and the night shrouded the desert land. At a gas station far from the city, the rolling door of the convenience store is hidden, and the faint light shines through the crack in the door, and several figures can be faintly seen walking by. Endless, it's time to close the door. There are often some Mexicans at this time, and the damn guys are hungry and they will do anything. A middle-aged man with a face full of scum, who opened his mouth to show his yellow teeth, walked towards the warehouse carrying a box of goods, and did not forget to turn back and shout at the yellow-skinned teenager at the front desk. Right away. Endless turned his head in response, but he didn't hurry to close the door. At this time, a black Chrysler outside drove to the door, and the closed roll door was opened, and a figure staggered in. The man's eyes were cloudy, and his face full of scumbags looked decadent. He walked in and went straight to the front desk, and said tiredly, "Hey, boy, have a few bottles of whiskey." "Howlett, we're closed." The middle-aged man poked his head out of the warehouse when he heard the sound, saw another guest, and said with a slightly dissatisfied expression, You should be glad the door isn't locked, or I'll tear it up." Logan Howlett gave him a blank look, ignored the scolding shopkeeper, looked down and took out his wallet, pulled out $20 with a painful heart, and handed it to the yellow-skinned boy in front of him. "Howlett, don't you have to get out of the car later?" With ridicule in his eyes, Endless smiled at the man with a vicissitudes face. "Ah, little furry, don't ask more, I'll pay you for the wine." Logan Howlett looked at each other, and couldn't help but be slightly stunned, and his innate strong senses made him feel that this front desk boy who had known each other for half a month seemed to know himself. "Every time I come here, the feeling in my heart grows stronger." But every time a moment passed, Logan Howlett dismissed similar thoughts, and a little self-deprecating, how could a teenager meet his old superhero? Even the middle-aged shopkeeper didn't come out, let alone him. Superhero? No, or rather mutant, it seems to have long been a thing of the past. Now in 2029. There hasn't been a new mutant in this world for about a few years, and the entire race is disappearing. Okay, wait a minute. Endless sighs flashed, and he turned to face the liquor cabinet to find the whiskey. In fact, Logan Howlett guessed that he had been recognized by the teenager in front of him. Because Endless is a traverser. 18 years ago, he traveled to this Marvel universe and became the last batch of mutants born in the old era, born with normal fertility. But unfortunately, the Marvel universe's mutant is going through a catastrophic era. X-Men and Xavier Genius Academy, long since disbanded, and Mutant is gradually dying out. Endless, who traveled through, relied on his knowledge of Marvel. Simply judged that it is very likely that it is currently in the twilight of Wolverine's timeline. He was not sure at first, until he came to Santa Fe half a month ago. He recognized the decadent and alcoholic Wolverine at a glance. Other words. As a mutant, he is the object of hunting at any time, and fortunately he has survived all these years. And, by chance, he became the front desk cashier at this convenience store frequented by Wolverine. I also met Wolverine. As for Endless' contact with the elderly Wolverine, he wanted to obtain the self-healing factor in his body. A few months ago, he accidentally found that in addition to his natural mutant ability, he also accidentally obtained the ability to watch others fight and absorb certain specialties of the target. For example, a person's fighting skills, and a self-healing factor like Wolverine. It's all possible. This may be his only chance to turn over. After all, no one wants to live in fear all day. However, Endless and Wolverine have been out of the car a few times, and they have never seen each other make a move. As long as the person who provokes him does not behave too much, Wolverine can swallow his voice and will not even make any response. Sometimes, it really feels sad that the bloodiest and most brutal superhero in the past has now ended up so embarrassing. Goodbye. Logan Howlett took the wine, noticed the pity in the teenager's eyes, didn't care too much about pouring a sip of wine in front of him, turned and walked towards the convenience store. After a while, he drove Chrysler outside the convenience store, and the fire was turned off in the open space not far away, as if he was going to sleep after drinking. Old drunkard. The shopkeeper came out after moving the goods and wiped his sweat, and couldn't help but spit on Wolverine. Boy, don't learn from him in the future. No interest, even the Uber driver is not good at it. When he was drunk, he said he fantasized about buying a day-by-day ship. Daydreaming. Endless shook his head in his heart without responding, and the shopkeeper behind him saw that he was silent, knowing that he had a good relationship with Howlett, and casually explained a few words and turned away. It's really a tiger falling pingy and being bullied by dogs. Endless muttered, looked at Chrysler who was stalling outside, and shook his head. Then close the rolling door and go into the room to wash. This area is not safe at night. There must be a person to guard the store. Today it is Endless' turn, so he must sleep in the store tonight, so as not to be pried by some hungry old ink. After taking a shower, Endless lies in bed thinking about how to deal with it in the future. After all, this world is not like the 199,999 universe. His identity is special, and he is always in danger. And this universe is a little different. To be precise, the universe is a bit chaotic. In this timeline, X-Men disbanded, corresponding to the Twilight Wolverine. But he often saw information about Stark Industries in the newspaper news, which means that this timeline is going on with two cosmic events that should not have happened. It's just that, apparently X-Men Wolverine is going faster, and the entire mutant race is in a state of near extinction. And the events of the 199,999 universe have just begun, and Tony Stark is still a playboy. Thinking about it, Endless faintly heard noise and cursing outside the window, and even the sound of metal clashing. Damn, it's that group of old Mo who came to the door. Lao Mo was referring to the group of smuggled immigrants from neighboring countries of America, who often roam the road of crime without law. Thereupon, Endless hurriedly got up and opened the window to look outside, and suddenly the slight anger under his eyes gradually turned into anticipation and excitement. Because a few old inks in the distance are squatting next to Logan Howlett's car, seemingly planning to remove Wolverine's tires, which is not the familiar plot of Wolverine 3. Wouldn't you wait for the enraged Wolverine to strike? Endless realized this, and his ability would trigger whenever a battle occurred. If you're lucky, Wolverine's super self-healing factor is in hand. Then there will be a means of survival. Outside the gas station convenience store, not far from the open space around Chrysler, a few old inks came down from a van, looking at the valuable car, obviously a little excited. Few people drive Chrysler here, after all. Rich people basically don't come to this kind of place at night to turn off the fire and rest. So it seems that the Chrysler parked in the open space may have been rented by the owner, but this group of old inks don't care. As long as they can make money, the others don't care about them even if they die. Unload the wheel, take the money and leave, don't poke Lucy. If you break the wheel again this time, I want you to look good. Quick, do it. While going, haven't you all eaten? Fuck, do you think you're here for a party? Turn off the radio. If you attract the police, we won't be able to leave. Several old inks squatted on the back wheel of the car, holding tools and constantly tinkering with the wheels, and the excited look on their faces may be the reason why the light is too dark. None of them noticed a person lying in the back seat. Just look down and tinker with the tires of the vehicle, and because the force is too strong, it will inevitably make the shaking of the car more and more intense, and the entire body is shaking. Fuck. In the back seat of Chrysler's car, Logan Howlett had just finished drinking and lay down, a little confused and ready to go to sleep, and then get out of the car late at night. Unexpectedly, after only lying down for a few minutes, someone outside came up to look for something, and listening to the voice of this group of people, it seemed to be interesting to his car. This made Logan Howlett couldn't help but curse in a low voice, staggered to his feet, opened the door and walked down, and circled around the front of the car. Hey! Don't lose your nut, bro. Hurry up, put it all on the car. Okay, move lightly, you have to go guys, move quickly. Sure enough, there were several Spanish-speaking Laomo gathered around the rear wheel. One of them squatted and twisted the nut on the tire vigorously, and the person holding the torch behind couldn't help but urge. Hey guys, these nuts are all chrome and worn out by you. Look at these tires, the plating has been scratched by all of you. Wolverine drunkenly swept through the tires, not as directly as rough as he did when he was younger, but stood in place trying to convince these old ink punks. He no longer has the fighting spirit as before, and he wants to deal with many things lightly. Fuck. Several old Mo slowly turned to look at him, the leader of the people with fierce eyes, looking at the decadent and white-haired old man in front of him. His tone was full of threats, and said coldly, "Old fellow, are you sure?" The elderly Wolverine propped up on the car with one hand. His vicissitudes of his face showed decadence, and said weakly, "This car is rented, no one will spend money to drive one." Bang! However, before he could finish his words, Laomo, who was the leader, raised the short-barreled gun in his hand, pulled the trigger sharply, and the sound of fire-filled gunfire resounded in the endless desert. Wolverine's chest fell to the ground with a huge amount of impact. Find death and keep working. The eyes of the old ink at the head revealed fierceness and contempt, and the tone of the shotgun was indifferent, and it was not enough to be afraid of killing people on the street in Santa Fe, not to mention that the target of the shooting was still an old man with no strength and no background. Saying that, a few old Mo turned around, ready to continue working. But when they turned their backs, the blood hole in Wolverine's chest, which fell to the ground, stopped bleeding. He felt the pain on his body, and cursed in a low voice, "Damn." Then Wolverine shook and stood up, his gloomy eyes staring at Laomo, who was gathered around the back wheel and continued to work. However, Wolverine's movement to get up also attracted the attention of several people again. Old Mo's head held a flashlight, a little incredulous. How come? He was absolutely sure that after pulling the trigger just now, the bullet definitely penetrated this guy's chest. How could he still stand up? This is absolutely impossible. Seriously, you'll regret it. Wolverine lowered her body slightly. Her eyes were like a wolf haunted by the night, an old wolf in the twilight to be precise, and her eyes were full of fierceness. But it feels like even an elderly old wolf is enough to crush several of them. Words fall. Wolverine drunkenly raised his hands, and the sharp steel claws on his fists slowly extended out, but when he looked down, he found that the steel claws that were sticking out became shorter and shorter. Settle him. Old Mo's head pupils contracted, and his slightly trembling voice showed that he was a little frightened, and then took advantage of Wolverine to look at the steel claws out of his mind. He suddenly raised his fist and swung it towards Wolverine's temple. Bang! Stunned, Wolverine was knocked back a few steps by a sudden punch, but he soon found control and stabbed the arm of the person on the right with a steel claw. The man clenched the pistol and was torn off before he could pull the trigger. Fuck. Kill him. This guy is a mutant. The old inkhead no longer realized the identity of the person in front of him. Then he lived in vain for so many years. Although there have been many years in the world, no new mutant was born, but the older generation of mutant has not died. They are still living in a corner of the world. I didn't expect to meet one today. Hearing this, several other old Mo did not dare to slacken, decisively raised the gun in their hands and pulled the trigger, and suddenly the fire from the muzzle of the gun filled the space. You don't take a taxi. Wolverine caught a glimpse of a man shooting at the car. His face changed greatly and he rushed over with a slight embarrassment, and blocked a few bullets with his flesh. It's just that his old body obviously can't withstand the continuous fire of firearms like his youth, and after a while, he staggered a little and leaned over. Looked at. An old ink next to him stepped forward and kicked Wolverine to the ground directly, and then immediately shouted at several people around, "Kill him quickly." In the next second, the rest of the people rushed up to punch and kick him, venting the anger in their hearts, and even the old inkhead raised the gun in his hand and aimed it at Wolverine's head. Trying to pull the trigger and solve this dangerous mutant. At this time, a childish voice came from behind several people, "What are you doing?" Endless, who had been staying in the gas station convenience store, saw that the time was almost gone, and hurried out, if his butterfly effect caused Wolverine to die. That moment was bad. Although Wolverine has a self-healing factor in his body, his self-healing ability has fallen off a cliff in recent years, and no one can guarantee what kind of accidents will occur. At the moment when Endless walked into the battlefield, a cold voice sounded in his head. Battle detected, drop reward, super self-healing factor, Wolverine. Battle detected, drop reward, super self-healing factor, Wolverine. Endless listened to the echoing voice in his head. His expression was slightly stunned, and then joy appeared under his eyes, and he was naturally familiar with the sound of the alarm clock ringing. This is the ability he accidentally gained earlier, and by watching the battle of a certain target, he can pick up the reward dropped by the target on the spot. The first time I discovered this ability was in an underground black boxing match. Due to the embarrassment of life, he accidentally obtained the opponent's fighting skills when participating in the competition, and finally won an absolute victory with his skills and avoided being suspected. And now he has seen Wolverine's super self-healing factor after watching the battle, which is the only useful ability in months. To be precise, Wolverine was also the first person he had encountered in many years with extraordinary powers. What is the super self-healing factor? It can make people's bodies exceed the natural recovery speed of any normal human being, and even reach a perverted recovery self-healing speed. Only by completely destroying their bodies can they stop the action of self-healing factors. And Wolverine's nearly 200 years old is also because the self-healing factor has the effect of slowing down aging, thereby prolonging life. Endless' ability to obtain the self-healing factor and his young body undoubtedly gave him the capital to survive in such a dangerous world. A raw suction room. A line of property panels appeared in front of him, which seemed to be his own situation. People panel, endless. Ability, variant ability, small water control, born. Variant ability super self-healing factor, Wolverine. Fuck. However, now is not the time to look at the panel. The old Incas standing not far in front have turned their eyes to Endless, and the previous few people were still a little scared when they heard the unfamiliar voice. When they saw that it was a 17 or 18-year-old boy, they secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After all, as outlaws, they will also worry about being targeted by the police, and the police in America are no joke. They will chase you to the ends of the earth. What's more, in the current society where science and technology are extremely developed. Stinky boy, you've come to the wrong place. The old Mo who was the leader was full of fierce indifference under his eyes, raised the gun with one hand, aimed at the yellow-skinned boy's head, and said in a gloomy tone, "Boss, don't let this kid go, he has already seen our faces." A younger brother next to him whispered. Logan Horrit, who was faint on the ground, heard it clearly, and he shouted at Endless with his hands on the ground, "Endless! You fucking guy, what are you doing here? Hurry up and get back." "Hey! Old boy, I don't care what the hell you are, you better be honest with me. Otherwise, I'll see if this little guy can catch this shot like you." Old Motuzi grinned and sneered. It would be much easier to have hostages, and he was worried that the old guy would break the net. "Damn, he's an ordinary person, you guys let him go." Logan Howlett clenched his fists and forced the brutal beastly voice in his heart. He is no longer a superhero, he can no longer punish evil and promote good, and he can no longer save others, but he does not want to involve an ordinary person because of his own problems. "Shut up! What the hell are you? I thought the mutant all over the world was extinct, but I didn't expect that there were rats like you in the world, hiding in the shadows all day to survive. Aren't you tired of living? Why don't you end the pain earlier?" The old Inkhead held a gun in each hand, aimed at two people in different directions, turned his head to look at the embarrassed mutant on the ground, his eyes full of disgust. "It's a pity that social scum like you are still alive, and how can Wolverine, as the former X-Men, die so easily? Compared to him, I think some people should have cut themselves off earlier." At the moment, the teenager Endless, who was standing not far away, unexpectedly spoke, his tone full of awe and contempt. From the words, it is clear that two different emotions correspond to different people. Wolverine heard the code name that no one Raw had called for a long time. He looked at the teenager in shock, a bitter smile on the corner of his mouth. It seems that this little guy really knows himself. Unexpectedly, there are still people who recognize Wolverine in this era. "Shut up!" When the old Inkhead heard this, he glared at Endless, who didn't know whether he was alive or dead, as if he might pull the trigger at any time, but he couldn't help but be stunned by what the young man said. Turning his head to look at Logan Howlett on the ground again, he seemed to recognize him, and he suddenly realized, "Holy crap, I recognize you Wolverine, when I was a child, I often read Xavier's school comics. You're all so old. Even the iconic steel claw can't be fully extended now. Old Motuzi and several people around him looked at Wolverine on the ground with a look of embarrassment. Immediately a hint of banter suddenly rose in the eyes of the old inkhead, and his voice was a little strange. Wolverine, can you still fight crime now? What do you mean by that? Wolverine smelled the danger and slowly raised her head, beast-like eyes, staring at the Mexican in front of her, her mouth as if she would tear it apart in the next second. Calm down. Old Motuzi signaled the person to step back step by step. He knew that Wolverine would not make any drastic moves at all because of Endless' safety. But just because Wolverine won't mean he won't. When Laomo's head led his men to retreat nearly 10 meters, his eyes were fierce. He pulled the trigger sharply, and in a flash, the muzzle of the shotgun flashed, and a bullet shot into the heads of Wolverine and Endless at the same time. Bang! Roar! Faced with the speeding bullet, Logan Howlett reflexed. Lee raised his hand and used the adamantium steel claw to cut off the bullet, just when he looked in Endless' direction. His pupils suddenly contracted, endless bloodshot frantically crawled all over his eyes, and his eyes gradually became extremely hideous and terrifying, like a beast that gradually broke free. Because he saw Endless being shot through the head, and the emaciated teenager fell to the ground in response. Next second, the beastly nature in the heart of the elderly Wolverine completely exploded. His open arms showed a strong figure, and his whole person stomped on the ground like a fierce beast rushing towards the group of old ink. Fuck. Shoot. The old ink had miscalculated. He thought that he could penetrate the opponent's head with one shot, but he did not expect that the seemingly elderly Wolverine could even cut off a bullet. This time, however, he didn't even have a chance to react, and Wolverine, who burst out with full strength, was not at all something that ordinary humans could block, facing steel claws that cut iron like mud, and powerful super strength. Within seconds, several people's heads fell to the ground and collapsed in a pool of blood. Only the two people standing near the van driven by Laomo were spared because of the distance. However, they saw Wolverine in rage, his legs weakened with fright, and he ran towards the van in horror, but just as they passed Endless' body, Endless, who had fallen to the ground, suddenly stretched out a hand to them. Roar! The two surviving old Mo witnessed Wolverine's brutality. Their faces were pale and desperate, and they strode in the direction of the van, not noticing the yellow-skinned boy under their feet, their fingers trembling slightly. Next second, Endless, who had originally fallen in a pool of blood, suddenly stretched out his hand to the two old Mo who fled, grabbed the ankles of the two hard, and then pulled back. Bang! Fuck! The two didn't even have a chance to resist, but felt that their ankles were being dragged by someone, and the whole person immediately fell face to face in response, and severe pain came from their faces. The sudden situation made them a little dizzy, and regardless of the severe pain on their faces, they turned their heads to look back, but when they saw the figure slowly standing up, an unprecedented sense of fear quickly occupied their minds, and then their throats seemed to be stuck by someone, and they couldn't breathe. Because what caught his eye was Endless, who was pierced through the brain, and he still had hideous bullet holes in his brain, and blood and unknown liquid flowed out of the blood hole. The viscous liquid stained the young man's immature face, making him look terrifying and terrifying, revealing a strange aura. How can it be? One of the old ink trembled. If you don't die after being shot, the only possibility is that the teenager in front of you is also a mutant and has an extremely perverted self-healing ability. Soon, the idea in my heart was confirmed again. I saw that the blood hole on Endless' brain door began to squirm, and the bullet stuck in the brain door squeezed out and fell, and then gradually appeared integrate, recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. If it weren't for the blood, no one would have imagined the tragic scene of the teenager. What? Logan Howlett killed a few people in a row and was a little breathless, not planning to chase the remaining two. As a result, I saw Endless come to life. Even the blood hole in his head has been restored to its original state, which means that this little guy is mutant. How can it be? There has been no newborn mutant in the world for more than 20 years, and Endless is only 17 or 18 years old. The appearance of the teenager mutant shocked Wolverine. But this is not what Wolverine is most shocked by, but he smells a familiar breath in Endless, especially when the bullet hole in the teenager's head heals, as if the other party saw his young figure. Ah! When Wolverine was out of her mind, a heart-rending scream sounded in her ears. I saw the two old inks who were originally lying on the ground, their eyes suddenly red, the blue tendons on their foreheads burst out, their faces were twisted in pain, and their legs were twitching and swinging wildly. Then their eyes overflowed with blood and their mouths foamed. In the end, his eyes rolled and his head tilted completely out of breath. This. Logan Howlett was stunned when he saw this. The situation seemed to be different from what he thought. This little guy seemed to have other variant abilities. Raw. On the other side, Endless kicked the two of them each, and only breathed a sigh of relief when he was sure that he had no breath. He just used the innate mutant ability to control the water in the two of them and suffocate them. After all, he only got Wolverine's self-healing factor, and his strength has not been improved, and he is not as fast as this move. Endless couldn't help but touch the door of his brain, and after touching it, he didn't find the slightest trace, and he didn't feel very emotional in his heart. Who the hell are you? At this time, Logan Howlett came over and wondered. As you can see, a teenager mutant. Endless responded while wiping the blood from his face. But this. How is it possible, you are? Logan Howlett heard the answer, still with a puzzled look on his face. I understand you, but I was indeed born through normal childbearing, not through some kind of technological means. Endless could see Wolverine's deep concern. After all, there had been more than 20 years in this world, and no new mutant had been born. The reason is that humans have mastered the code of the mutant gene and intervened to modify and treat the mutant gene through dietary injection. In fact, at the end of Wolverine 3, scientists told Logan that all food over the years had been injected with a substance that could alter mutants' genes. So let mutant begin to weaken and even die, and no new mutant will be born. It's incredible, no wonder Charles talks about the new mutant all day. Logan Howlett listened thoughtfully, and then looked at the yellow-skinned boy with a bitter smile on his lips. You are estimated to be the last newborn in the old era, and that was more than 10 years ago. But it's sad, God let you come down and suffer. With that, he shook his head again mockingly. Wolverine, stop inking, quickly deal with the scene, otherwise it will be bad when the police come in a while. Endless was optimistic and didn't care. Anyway, he had a gold finger and it wasn't impossible to live in the world. Besides, it wasn't survival. He at least has to hang when he comes to this world. How to deal with it? Wolverine hadn't killed anyone for a while, and he shook his head and cursed in a low voice. Killing someone would definitely attract the attention of government departments. When the time comes to find out on his head, it is estimated that so many years of seclusion will be broken again. Buried. Endless was speechless and looked up. The night is dark and the wind is high, and the moon is full. and there are no people around. Isn't it a good time to bury people? I really don't know what Wolverine thinks in the movie, and she ran directly to leave a handle for people. Wolverine was stunned when she heard this. This is a 17 or 18-year-old boy who said the words. But there seemed to be no other good way, so he had to move all the bodies into the van, then clean up the scene, and then drove Chrysler and Endless towards the depths of the desert together. On the way, Wolverine held the steering wheel with one hand, treated the wound with the other, took off his shirt and forcefully squeezed out the bullets in his body, falling to the ground to cause a crisp sound, which was just a seemingly simple thing in the past, but made the elderly Wolverine gasp, as if tormented. Endless in the van secretly shook his head when he saw this scene. The omnipotent, near-immortal Wolverine is old after all. At this time, a voice in Endless' head pulled his eyes back. Detected to get the first ability, reward, dimensional teleportation, incredible man. Detected to get the first ability, reward, dimensional teleportation, incredible man. At this time, a cold voice sounded in Endless' head, and what was mentioned in it made him stunned. Incredible people. He knows him as an old Marvel fan. This guy is a product of early comics, and it is extremely unpopular in Marvel, and few people will recognize it. However, incredible people are bug-like existences. His ability is a molecule that controls the body, can transform into all Marvel characters at will, and can have the ability to change objects. Even Marvel's screenwriters and comic narration can play between applause. Its ability to control molecules to an outrageous point that it can modify anything casually, once depriving the transcendent of its ability. The planet devourer of the five gods gave the Incredible Man an evaluation. The Incredible is enough to threaten the space-time architecture of the almighty universe, and the Incredible is determined to start the almighty universe level other battles. And dimensional teleportation is just one of the incredible means. But just one ability is enough to drive countless people crazy. Endless' most impressive impression of the incredible dimensional teleportation is that he can break the fourth wall and shuttle through any beautiful comic world. It's the world of American comics. And not just the world of Marvel. He once brought DC's Supermaster back to Marvel's real-world people, and let the omnipotent Supermaster do things for himself. Endless understands that with this ability, it means that he can travel to other American comic worlds, obtain different abilities, and constantly enhance his strength. Thinking about it, he suddenly felt that his beautiful life seemed to be bright. Hey, boy, what are you giggling about? Logan Howlett changed his clothes, poured a large sip of wine, and saw a smile on the corner of the boy's mouth, but he smiled like a fox at a young age. I was thinking about where to bury these guys for a while. Endless realized that he was smiling too lewdly, and hurriedly retracted his expression. However, he really wants to quickly deal with this car trouble, and then go back to study dimensional teleportation, which may help him quickly improve his strength. As long as he can contact the existence of a higher dimension, he has the opportunity to get the other party's ability. Definitely Endless is not stupid enough to contact those high-dimensional creatures with his current strength, and those big guys may be annihilated by him with a single thought. Everything can only come one step at a time. I can't guarantee that he will even be able to do it in the future, so that the entire American comic world can be greatly integrated. Finally, at Wolverine's suggestion, the van was pushed into a deep canyon in the desert, and the vehicle did not explode. Only the loud noise caused by the landing reverberates, but fortunately, the situation at the bottom of the canyon cannot be seen from above. Ordinary people will not go down to the valley with rough terrain, and the wreckage below will not be found in a short time, and will not be targeted by wandering teams and government departments for the time being. Now the government is offering a bounty to Mutant, who they believe should be imprisoned. The two finished disposing of the body. Logan Howlett drove Endless back to the gas station's convenience store, borrowed the convenience store's bathroom, and washed the blood on his hands and car. He still has to get out of the car in the middle of the night, so naturally he can't just go like this. Before leaving, Wolverine thought about it and handed over an address to the yellow-skinned boy and said, "Pay attention to safety. If you get into trouble, you will come to this place to find me." It may be that Endless was the last mutant born in the old era, and after spending more than a month together, Wolverine's conscience made him say these words. "No, Wolverine, you're old, it's up to me to say this. If you get into trouble, remember to come here and find me." Endless smiled. He naturally hoped to participate in the Battle of Wolverine in the future. Although the super self-healing factor has been obtained, Wolverine has more than just self-healing factors, but also other abilities. Moreover, Wolverine also hides Charles Professor X, who has a strong psychic ability. This is also one of the goals that Endless wants to achieve. If you get the ability of the mind of the Professor, it is equivalent to obtaining the ability that threatens no less than nuclear weapons. Shit. Logan Howlett smiled for a long time when he heard this, shook his head and drove away. Obviously, he didn't take Endless' words to heart. After all, no matter how weak he is also a battle-hardened fighter, and for more than 100 years, he has become proficient in almost all the fighting techniques in the world. Coupled with a lot of experience, it is not comparable to a teenager. When Chrysler's taillights disappeared into the horizon, Endless slowly closed the rolling door, as if this area was the territory of those old inks, and no other criminals appeared at this time. It's good that he's not in the mood to deal with anything else right now, and his attention is all on the new ability dimension portal. People panel, Endless. Ability, Variant ability, Small water control, Born. Variant ability Super self-healing factor, Wolverine. Dimensional teleportation, Incredible Man. Incredible Man, ability from the amazing race of Incredible Man. The place where the ability can be reached depends on your imagination, and the high-dimensional imagination can let you go anywhere. Endless looked at Jian Shao, who teleported from the dimension, and it seemed relatively simple. So he sat down at the head of the bed and tried to open the portal to DC, but there was no movement in the dim room for a long time. More than 10 seconds later, the ability of dimensional teleportation seems to not exist, and does not cause any movement. How could it be? Just when Endless thought that the posture was wrong, the space in front of him changed, gradually showing a twisted and broken shape. Next second. Raw. The previously empty space suddenly tore out a portal, and then the huge amounts of suction brought Endless in. Above the city with tall buildings, heavy dark clouds are like a curtain, shrouding the bustling city below, and the dim light makes the city look particularly oppressive. The clutter of goods on the streets is thrown away haphazardly, and passers-by walk through the road after the rain, causing splashes on the soles of their feet, but no one cares about this. Everyone is immersed in busy anxiety. The city is always depressing inside and out, and a similar atmosphere is all over the city. After all, this is Gotham. Gotham. Endless looked up at the building facilities quite in the style of the 90s of the last century, and felt a little emotional in his heart. He really came to the DC universe, which is also a big event in the United States, through the dimensional portal. It's just that he didn't figure out which universe he crossed into for the time being. Like Marvel, DC also has the concept of multi-universe, and different universes are going on at the same time, and different things and disasters occur. But fortunately, this universe has not been restarted. Endless muttered as he walked down the street, remembering that there had been a reboot in the DC universe. If he meets with his current strength, 80% will be a complete calf. Now he has to figure out what time period he is in. After all, he came to the DC universe, but in order to obtain a powerful ability, and Superman is undoubtedly one of the goals. For the superior ability, it can be said that there is no one who does not desire. Only, I don't know if Clark came to Earth at the moment. It's getting dark. Endless felt a little unlucky. It was going to be dark just after crossing over. The haze-shrouded deep space soon darkened, and it didn't take long for night to fall completely, and most of the native Gotham people chose not to go out again after dark. Even if you go out, you will choose a place with more traffic, like Endless, who selectively walks to sparsely populated areas. Passers-by will only secretly shake their heads when they see it. There are also people who avoid it, and the devil knows whether this seemingly harmless guy is surprised or frightened in his pocket in the next second. As a matter of fact, the reason why Endless went to an area with few people and a frequent crime rate was to accidentally hear Batman's news and see if he could meet the other party. However, not long after he left, a tall figure holding a cold hard object suddenly appeared in front of him. "Stand still and don't move." The big man aimed at the yellow-skinned boy with a gunman. His fierce eyes flashed surprise, and after waiting for a night, he thought he was going to return with a feather, but he didn't expect to wait for a defenseless teenager. So he said viciously, "Little guy, obediently hand over the money, I promise that no one will be hurt." Endless was stunned, did not run into Batman, but ran into the criminal first. It is worthy of Gotham, and the criminals are estimated to be more than the righteous people. Don't be stunned. Hurry up and hand over the valuables. Seeing him, the big man was a little anxious and a little angry, and recently he often heard news about the presence of vigilantes. He didn't want to be targeted by that kind of guy. "Calm down, I don't want you to get hurt either." Endless Smoot was calm without the slightest wave, and it seemed that the person who was pointed at by someone was not him. "Fuck. I don't have time to listen to your mouth cannon, hurry up and take it out, otherwise I can't guarantee what will happen." When the big man saw the young man's calm appearance, he immediately felt insulted by the other party, and waved the gun in his hand and said coldly, "He has killed no less than 10 people, what about killing one more? Airplanes. Wow." But, right at this time, a sharp flying dart streaked through the air, shining dazzling white light in the light, spinning and hitting the back of the big man's hand. The sharp blade immediately cut through the outer skin, and the blurred flesh and blood were exposed to the air. "Ah!" The big man screamed, and the gun fell to the ground without his hand. Battle detected, drop reward, super flying darts skill, Batman. At this time, a cold voice also sounded in Endless' mind, and the name mentioned in it made his eyes brighten. Batman. Bruce Wayne finally appeared. If Batman shows up, it means that at the moment Superman Clark, it's likely to be in the Met. Please get out of this place. Sure enough, a figure behind him fell steadily, followed by a male voice that obviously deliberately changed his voice, and the other party saw his appearance clearly when he passed by, and it was Batman dressed in black. Just Batman of this period. To Endless' surprise, the other party's costume did not look mature enough, without a cape and belt, and the universe's Batman seemed to be in its infancy. and he didn't detect a deep resentment in his eyes. It can be judged that Bruce Wayne in front of him is in its infancy. "You're the vigilante." The big man saw Batman's face change greatly, and recently Gotham has often circulated rumors that someone punishes ****** and eliminates evil at night. I didn't expect everything to be true. Just grab it, no one will be hurt again. Bruce Wayne said coldly. Yu Guang had no intention of sweeping back, and found that the yellow-skinned boy was still standing in place. "You're not leaving." "Why go? I'm not in danger." Hearing this, Bruce was a little surprised. The person who left Gotham Mayor for only 10 years, has such courage exercised at a young age. Surprised. He was keenly aware of the metal grinding sound of the butt, and suddenly looked up to see the big man raising the gun and pulling the trigger without hesitation. Bang! Well. Fortunately, Bruce has been training for many years to react extremely quickly, and lowered his body to avoid the incoming bullets. Just when he was about to throw out the flying darts, the teenager behind him picked up the previously dropped flying darts on the ground at some point, threw it out hard, and plunged into the criminal's neck fiercely, and the sharp flying darts was like a knife cutting through the skin. In an instant, endless blood splattered. The criminal clutched his neck in pain, knelt down on the ground with a fierce face, and looked at the two people in front of him in horror, his throat trying to make a sound, but it would only make the blood flow faster. "Damn! What did you do?" Bruce Wayne was confused. Today is his 4th day as a vigilante at night. At the beginning he didn't think of making a fuss, but the seemingly immature teenager tried to lay a dead hand so decisively. Even people like him who had prepared mentally in advance were shocked by the other party's actions. Endless watched his eyes gradually fade into light, and finally fell the criminal, without the slightest pity and fluctuations. As a mutant, he can survive in the dangerous Marvel universe for more than 10 years. He would not be merciful, but looked at Bruce with a smile and said with a smile, "Rich boy, welcome to Gotham. There are only 2 kinds of people here, crazy and normal." "Rich boy, welcome to Gotham. There are only 2 kinds of people here, crazy and normal." Bruce Wayne's face under the mask was visibly stiff after hearing these words, and his eyes revealed mixed emotions. As a Gotham native, he naturally knows the dangers of the city, one of the highest crime rates in America, and it can be said that crime is happening all the time in the city. Almost all crazy people gather here, even with personalities that you can't imagine. But really make young Bruce Wayne was stunned because these words came out of the mouth of a 17 or 18-year-old boy. It seems that in the 10 years since leaving Gotham, this dirty city has not been improved. The same depravity and squalor. Maybe his return is the right choice. When I left, I wanted to come back one day and let this unchanging city get metamorphosis, and obviously it was the right choice. Then let me start with you. Bruce Wayne pulled out the rope, revealing a chill in his eyes, and his tone was full of danger. "So, you're going to kill me?" Endless was not surprised in the slightest when he heard Bruce's words. After all, no one can commit crimes in front of Batman's eyes, and even some people ridicule Gotham, which is ruled by Grandpa, and has a little criminal idea for more than 10 years, it may be subdued in advance. Definitely, not the fledgling Bruce now. Wayne. That's something only criminals do, and I'll send you to jail with my own hands. Bruce. Wayne said indifferently. It seems that you don't know much about Gotham, and you don't even know what Gotham is. Endless sneered. He knew that before Batman swore to become a vigilante to punish adultery and evil, he had set the principle of never killing, which was the last insurance to prevent himself from falling into darkness. After all, if you kill someone, you can never turn back, which is no different from a criminal. It's just a pity that his decision led to the disabling and even death of his companions, such as Dick Grayson, Barbara Gordon, Jason Todd, Sarah Essen. Similar tragedies were caused by Bruce's soft heart. To put it nicely, I don't want to fall into darkness. The ugly thing is the living spirit of America, the son of big capitalists, the embodiment of justice, and the endorsement of the goodness of capital. Foolish people, you are going astray. Bruce. Wayne was too lazy to talk nonsense with him, and rushed in the direction where Endless was with both feet, vowing to catch the shameless teenager today. Raw. The moment his muscular body started, it was no less than the start of a world-class track and field athlete, and the whole person instantly turned into a black shadow and rushed straight to each other. It's like a sudden explosion of beast. This also stems from Bruce's rigorous physical and intellectual training from the age of 11, after harsh training and long periods of eating habits, biofeedback training. Let his physical fitness reach the highest level of humanity. His strength, speed, endurance, reflexes, and flexibility surpassed the Olympic champions of the same period. Raw. However, even so, in the face of the sudden attack, Endless instantly reacted and withdrew his body to the rear, and his fist passed through the fist to cause a piercing wind. The hissing sound is particularly harsh. Bruce was also a little surprised to see that a punch fell short, but soon took advantage of the victory to pursue Endless and launch a more fierce attack. Battle detected, drop reward, top fighting skills, Batman. Top fighting skills. After Endless heard that voice in his head, the memory of fighting techniques flooded into his mind, and he mastered more than 100 fighting techniques at once. To be precise, it's 127 fighting techniques. I have to say, Bruce Wayne is one of the most powerful human martial arts masters on the planet when it comes to fighting technique. After he mastered the top fighting skills in an instant, he immediately saw through the blues in front of him. Wayne's way, predicting the other party's next move, leaned slightly to the side. Bang! Bruce Wayne's punch hit the wall directly behind him, and the wall tiles were suddenly cracked by the bombardment. Well, it looks like you're also proficient in martial arts. He could tell at a glance that the teenager had also practiced. Gotham is full of talents, isn't it? Endless smiled calmly. What followed him was a more violent punch, and Bruce on the opposite side seemed to see that he also had a foundation, so he didn't care about letting go of his hands and feet, and his fists smashed towards him like a storm. Bang 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 bang. Bang bang. Every blow bursts out with extremely strong power, coupled with Bruce's training since childhood. Almost every blow is aimed at the point, and even senior martial arts experts will be unable to cope with such a terrifying attack. Apparently he wanted to knock Endless down today. It's just that Bruce completely underestimated Endless, and now his every shot is under the expectation of the yellow-skinned boy, and he can accurately dodge and play with ease every time. With dozens of punches in a row, Rel couldn't touch Endless. Seeing this, his face gradually became solemn, and the boy in front of him, who seemed to be 6 or 7 years younger than him, actually had such a powerful fighting skill. No matter what kind of moves he used, the other party could easily resolve it. Enough play, it's time to end. Endless is naturally able to cope with it easily. After all, he can be said to have completely integrated Bruce's philosophy and skills when it comes to martial arts. So, in the next second, when Bruce punched again, he immediately seized the opportunity to punch Batman in the abdomen. Gravity punched down. Bang! The young Batman suddenly turned pale, and his body retreated uncontrollably and fell to the ground. Although he was wearing protective clothing, the strength of the other party was terrifying, and his fist was like a bullet that made him dizzy for a while. This is the vigilante in Gotham at night. It seems that you are not very good. Endless squats in Bruce. Wayne sighed, shaking his head as if looking at a loser, continued, if I were a criminal, you would be dead by now. You don't understand, Gotham City survives. Ahem, cough. Bruce. Wayne was a little embarrassed, and the pain in his abdomen made him cough and couldn't say a word. I don't have time to waste with you, so end today. After meeting Batman, Endless already knew roughly the current development of the universe, which was roughly in its early stages. Bruce Wayne just became Batman. And Clark Kent, who probably hasn't become Superman yet, is probably still in college. That's fine. If all the heroes grow up, he can't collect these people's abilities. However, he does not plan to travel to the metropolis to find Clark now, and the worlds of Marvel and DC are going on for him at the same time, which means that it may be almost dawn on the Marvel side. And the plot of Wolverine 3 will also begin soon. Endless had to go back and find an opportunity to pick up Professor X's mental ability, and it would be easier to travel between the two worlds with that ability. And he didn't want Wolverine to die embarrassed like in the movie. It's time to go back. After Endless possessed the dimensional teleportation ability, he found that he could perceive the coordinates of the world by immersing himself in it, and he could transmit it at any time only by memorizing the coordinate information. He plans to return to the original Marvel Universe first. He can come back at any time after having coordinates. Anyway, no one will care at the moment, a weak person who can use dimensional teleportation. His strength is not enough to pose a threat to the universe at all, and naturally it will not attract the attention of high-dimensional beings. However, if it were not for the two cosmic times of Marvel and DC, it might be happening at the same time. He probably won't go back so early. After all, there is most likely Clark here, and perhaps Clark at this stage does not seem to be as strong in the future. But Clark is full of treasures, and if he can get one of the other party's super abilities, or even all of them, he may become an all-powerful universe in the future. Endless is not in a hurry, he has time. After dealing with Marvel, it's not too late to come to DC again. Thinking, he was just about to open the dimensional portal. At this time, Bruce, who turned his back on him. Wayne staggered to his feet, the rich boy's head still a little dizzy. He has not yet recovered from what happened just now. After all, he has been well educated since he was a child. How could he have thought that he would be taught a lesson by a cheaply dressed teenager? Tonight's incident will undoubtedly become a shame for Bruce's volunteer career, and the future king of Gotham was taught the survival of Gotham who did not understand by a guy with a foreign accent. For the rulers of the Wayne family, it is definitely a great shame. Damn it, boy, don't let me catch you again. Bruce. Wayne's voice was low and hoarse, and his eyes were full of anger, and he turned his head to look, only to find that there was nothing behind him, only footprints on the black mud on the ground. If it weren't for the pain in his body, he even suspected that the man was fantasizing. Damn it. Actually gone. Bruce's face became even more gloomy when he saw this. He had only used this trick on Detective Gordon yesterday, but tonight he was tricked by a hairy boy. This made the young and vigorous Bruce determined to find the guy just now. Meanwhile, the world of Marvel is somewhere in the universe. Santa Fe, New Mexico, the endless desert sky rises in the garden, the remnants of the clouds are slightly red, and the earth is gradually illuminated by the sun. Gas station convenience store on the side of the desert road. In the staff dormitory of the convenience store, the space suddenly folded and shattered, then tore out of the portal, and then a figure appeared out of thin air in the room. Sure enough, both worlds are going on at the same time. Endless walked out of the portal and immediately looked at the clock on the nightstand, and the time in the Marvel Universe had also passed for more than 4 hours. Coincides with his time in Gotham. It seems that as he thought, both worlds are going on at the same time. After confirming this, he collapsed on the bed intending to sleep for a few hours. The convenience store did not open until 10 o'clock in the morning. He still had time to sleep, although he had a self-healing factor and improved physical function, but it did not mean that he did not need to rest. What's more, he also went around Gotham for a circle, and his body was already very tired after a night of tossing. In order to have the energy to cope with the impending crisis, he must maintain sufficient physical strength. So not long after lying in bed, he fell asleep in a daze. I don't know how long to go. Endless in the dormitory room was woken up by a sleep when he heard the middle-aged store manager knocking hard outside the door and seemed to be talking to someone. Endless. Open the door and a gentleman has something to look for you. The store manager knocked on the door, followed by several people. Click. The old iron door of the dormitory opened, and when Endless heard that someone was looking for him, he immediately thought of the few old inks he dealt with yesterday, most likely related to them. In addition, since he came to Santa Fe, he has always been very conservative. However, when he saw the comer clearly, an imperceptible surprise suddenly flashed under his eyes, but it was fleeting and unnoticed. Standing opposite was a white man with short blonde hair. His outstretched hand was mechanically constructed, with a hypocritical smile on his face, and his eyebrows gave people a sense of old calculation. Hello, I'm Donald Pierce. Last night someone claimed to have heard gunshots coming from this direction and that someone recognized a familiar figure seen nearby last night, who may have been a mutant. Donald. Pierce smiled. I heard gunshots last night, but I didn't go out to check. You understand that there are a lot of old inks in this place at night. They are hungry, they will definitely attack the convenience store. I don't dare to leave the convenience store. Endless looked sincere on the surface, but he was a little surprised in his heart. I didn't expect to clean up the body last night, and it was still by Donald. Pierce found out. But it seems normal to think about it too. This guy is one of the villains in Wolverine 3, the head of a company's security department and a brilliant engineer who specializes in building robots to deal with Mutant. He also hates Mutant and has a great interest in Wolverine Logan, both because he admires Wolverine and on the other hand, he hopes to defeat him. Perhaps it was this guy's excessive attention to Wolverine that would lead to him still being targeted even if it was handled so cleanly. However, the appearance of Donald means that the plot of Wolverine 3 has begun. Endless, if you have a clue, you must tell Mr. Donald. After all, those dangerous mutants are likely to cause us harm. The middle-aged store manager on the side said in a deep voice. Sorry, unfortunately I couldn't find any suspicious people. Endless years of survival experience allowed him to face various crises without the slightest emotion on his face. Excuse me, if you have a clue, call the number on the business card. Donald. Pierce resisted the business card, smiled politely, then turned and walked out with a gloomy face. When walking outside a convenience store, He received a message, then turned his head to look at his subordinates and said coldly, "Keep an eye on the guy inside, he has a problem. This guy may have something to do with Mutant, and people in this grade always like to be special." Obviously, he treated Endless as an ordinary teenager, mainly because he had checked Endless' file, and he was very clean and could not see any problems. Donald then continued, "Let me go to the meeting first, our former heroes. Wolf." The message received on the phone was that of Logan Howlett, an Uber driver account registered with fake identity information, and the person in the profile photo had an extremely old face. Donald Pierce still recognized at a glance that it was the long-missing Wolverine. At the moment the SUVs parked next to the gas station in the desert drove away one by one and disappeared on the horizon, leaving dust and fog everywhere they went, and soon the noisy engine sound gradually calmed down. "I didn't expect that there would be Mutant in the vicinity. I always thought they were all dead. After all, there have been no newborn mutant babies in 10 or 20 years. The store manager, York, grinned and showed his big yellow teeth, and he was afraid when he said this. "Fortunately, I left early last night, and if I ran into Mutant, I couldn't imagine what would happen." Endless didn't make a sound when he heard this. His eyes looked solemnly at the direction in which Donald and the others disappeared, and his brows couldn't help but wrinkle. If the universe follows the plot of Wolverine 3, then the reason why Donald left in a hurry should be to find Wolverine's whereabouts, otherwise he would not be in such a hurry. And Donald's appearance also means that Laura escaped. That is, the X-23. The girl who was made from Wolverine's genes. She will soon find Wolverine. She's a new mutant. Unlike Endless and Wolverine, the former has better genes. After all, each is carefully selected to cultivate it. A strong conflict is sure to erupt. Do you want to go to Wolverine in advance to discuss countermeasures? Endless pondered, and the next second dismissed the idea. After Wolverine heard the news, with his nature, he would run away directly with Professor X, which is a possible occurrence. Today's Logan Howlett is no longer what it used to be. In his heart, he longed for a peaceful life even more eager to escape reality, did not want to face reality. He fantasized about buying a day-by-day to escape to the sea with the professor, which is why he lived in seclusion. Let's wait and see. In the end, Endless decided to wait. In the case of uncertainty, everything still follows the original arrangement, so as not to cause a situation beyond his control. Moreover, his ability is only triggered in the case of battle. The same is true if you want to get Charles' mind ability. However, the current professor will certainly not use the mind ability easily, and after the accidental killing of X-Men members and innocent casualties, he has developed self-doubt, and has not had the slightest confidence he used to have. He has been avoiding the use of psychic ability, worried that he will lose control again. And soon after, outside a hospital somewhere in Santa Fe, there were few passers-by outside in humid air after the rain. Pooling pools on the ground were everywhere, and a Chrysler was parked near the hospital building. Then Logan Howlett in the car got out of the car a little uncomfortably and walked towards the blue-clothed doctor next to the hospital gate. The man held a bag of drugs in his hand and saw Wolverine's familiar face. The other party hurriedly handed over the bag in his hand, and then took Wolverine's money and left in a slight panic. The elderly Wolverine took the medicine bag into his arms, quickly got into the car, picked up the wine bottle for the first time and poured it a few times. He didn't notice that everything he had just done was all about to be taken into account by one person. Bang! After a while, the back door was opened. Then a figure got into the car and closed the door accordingly. Shit! Logan Howlett just wanted to open his mouth to scold, turned his head and noticed the other party's mechanical right hand, and suddenly his face froze, and he couldn't help but curse in a low voice. Look who it is, superhero Wolverine has actually become an addict. Donald. Pierce leaned back in his seat and said in a mocking tone. Damn it. Logan Howlett probably guessed the point. It must be that last night's murder revealed his identity, and it seems that years of seclusion are about to be broken. Sure enough, Donald turned over a document in the next second and said, I have a Texas friend. He found that a person who resembled Wolverine was working as an Uber driver, and where the gunshots rang out in the south last night, someone also saw a familiar figure. And chrome Chrysler tire nuts were found at the scene, along with a few drops of blood that were difficult to detect, and apparently there was a clash there last night. Donald saw through the rearview mirror that Wolverine's face was gloomy, and the curvature of the corners of his mouth couldn't help but deepen, and continued, people from the Federal Bureau may be interested in your affairs. What the hell are you going to do? Logan. Howlett's face trembled, he was gritting his teeth to suppress his emotions, and his hands clenched the steering wheel and wondered. Wolverine, don't be nervous, I'm not here to trouble you. There's a woman who stole one of my things, and I'm very responsible for that thing. She's a Mexican woman. Donald observed Wolverine's expression, keenly aware that the other party heard this, and his eyes were a little stunned. He knew that he was not looking for the wrong person, and continued, it just so happens that the person I am looking for, she should also be looking for you. Her name is Galareth. Sorry, I haven't heard of and never seen this woman. Logan Howlett thought of the strangely behaving woman he had seen in the cemetery not long ago. It seemed that the woman was the person Donald was talking about, but he was not in the mood to care about the others right now. Well, Wolverine, I know that guy is still alive, right? Donald did not debunk, but changed the topic. You hide Charles on the Mexican border, I know his location. When he said the second half of the sentence, his tone was aggravated, full of threat, and then he got up and handed out a business card. By the way, that cashier friend of yours, I also know his address. If you don't want to make a big deal, please contact me if you have a clue. Finish that, Donald. Pierce smiled contemptuously, turned to open the door and stepped out with one foot. He seemed to think of something again, and went back and added, I forgot to say, you are my idol. Bang. Then the doors closed again, making a huge amount of sound. Fuck. Logan Howlett smashed his hands on the steering wheel, his forehead was clear and his eyes were full of mania, hiding for so long or being targeted by this group of guys, and threatened by the other party, he didn't even have the ability to resist. Whether it's Charles or Endless at a convenience store. He didn't want anyone to have an accident, let alone be implicated by him. Thinking. Wolverine felt he could no longer sit still, and he drove to the border, finding a newspaper on the way that read day-by-day ship selling contact details. A long time ago. He fantasized about saving up to buy a day-by-day ship and going to live on the sea for his old age, which would be a good outcome for both the professor and himself. The sea is safer, and no one will restrain the mutant at sea. Thinking, Wolverine stepped on the accelerator and the car quickly disappeared into the road. And the other side. In an SUV, Donald sat in the main driver's seat, looking at the disappearing Chrysler. Wolverine, I wish you were a little self-aware, otherwise don't blame me for being ruthless. In the evening, the deep space of Santa Fe gradually darkened, half of the remnant sun in the sky, and then the horizon fell. As always. Endless sat in front of the cash register and looked at the recent news, and heard the sound of the store door opening in his ears, and looked up to see a familiar figure when he heard the sound. "Logan, don't get out of the car tonight, actually come so early." It was none other than Wolverine Logan, who tiredly walked to the front desk and brought a stool to sit down. A trace of guilt flashed in those deep eyes, and he stared at the young man for a moment and said, "I was discovered, and I may leave here after a while." Mutant is just that. Once discovered, they can only embark on the road of escape, which is what the mutant race has to face at the moment. Wolverine wanted to leave tomorrow, but the seller, who had no choice but to sell the daily number, refused to compromise on the price no matter how dead he lived, and he could only wait a little longer. At the same time, pray that the guy named Donald will never come to the door again. "Wolverine, you don't have to run away anymore." Endless heard this and said in a deep voice, "The purpose of my coming here tonight is to tell you that if you want to leave together, I won't care about one more person." Wolverine ignored his words and just said the purpose of coming here. After all, Donald must also have his eyes on Endless, naturally he can't leave the other party. After speaking, he took out the mobile phone ringing in his pocket, felt out a pair of glasses that had just been opened, put them on, and squinted at the information. Endless at the front desk also noticed the information in his hand, and he saw that the guest he was going to pick up seemed to be the Mexican woman Donald was looking for. It's just that Wolverine doesn't know this, and he naturally won't refuse when he sees a guest for lack of money. "You think about it, I can take you away when the time comes." Logan Howlett took a sip of wine and turned away. "I should be able to see the professor tomorrow." Endless watched Chrysler disappear into the pavement. Only then did he show the address that Wolverine had given earlier. If there is no miscalculation of tomorrow Donald's people, there will be a conflict with Wolverine on the Mexican border. After fleeing the Mexican border, Charles' ability is out of control again, and it is the perfect time to pick up the mind ability. Looks like he can quit his job at a convenience store. The other side. Logan Howlett, who left the gas station convenience store, rushed to the location on the Uber app as quickly as possible. However, things seemed a little different from what he thought. Here he saw again the woman he had seen in the cemetery this morning, what Donald had called the Mexican woman Galalaf, who apparently knew him and repeatedly begged him for help. Let him send a girl, Laura, to Canada, and Galaraf claims that Laura in her mouth is her daughter. Donald is her ex-boyfriend and the reason why they will hunt them down. At first, Wolverine definitely refused. He didn't want his life to be broken again, let alone get into this trouble, but when he saw the Mexican woman come up with a stack of money, he was silent and then agreed. He needed that money. So he agreed to pick up the people tomorrow and hurried back to an abandoned factory on the Mexican border, which was so old and rusty that even the nearby train made the house tremble. But it's safe, and no one is eyeing a dilapidated place. At the moment, in an abandoned water storage tank, a huge can fell and was opened on it, making a tight iron door. An elderly man in a wheelchair holds a sprinkler and constantly waters the vegetation on the tabletop, and his elderly face is full of markings. His hands holding the sprinkler trembled a little. At this time, he looked at Logan, who was sitting next to him with glasses, and smiled. "You should wear more glasses, so that you look younger," Charles said with a smile. Although he sometimes loses some memories of the past, he remembers that since he met Logan Howlett, the other party has remained young. Watching Logan grow old over the years, he has an indescribable taste in his heart. Hearing this, Logan held the frame, squinted at the information received in his hand, and said, "Charles, I'm going to be away for a few days, and I have a long and big order." Charles, who was in a wheelchair, paused, but there was no surprise, only that everything was expected. Logan didn't notice anything different, and he said in a deep voice, "After making this order, we will leave, and when the time comes, we will go to live on the sea. Is that safe?" Charles asked, not knowing what to say. "Safe, no one will bother us." "Logan, do you remember the new mutant I said?" "Professor, we'll be leaving soon. There won't be a new mutant. Does Endless know? He may be the last mutant born in the old era more than a decade ago." Logan sighed. Lately the professor had been nagging that he had seen a lot of new mutants born. He also said he wanted to save them. But for Wolverine, it was all over, and mutant was just a mistake made by God to give birth to them without allowing them to continue. Endless. He's special, but I'm not talking about him. Charles looked a little confused, and he paused and continued. "I know, but it's all over. There is no academy without the combat police, and even in decades there will not even be mutant." Logan Howlett shook his head, took off his glasses and carried the professor to the bed, and turned away with a gloomy face. Charles, who was lying on the bed, did not speak anymore, as if he saw something, and muttered in his mouth, "Laura, he will come to you tomorrow." That's it guys, hope you like this video. Like, share and subscribe the channel if you want more videos like this. Also tell me in the comment section down below if you have any recommendation about what I should make next. Thanks for watching.